Poverty has a way of knocking at your door like an old enemy, persistent, cold, and unforgiving. For Amara, the choice was never between staying or going. It was about survival. She was only 22, but life had already asked more of her than most ever face. Amara, born in a small East African village, grew up with dust under her feet and hope in her heart, the quiet girl with fierce eyes and louder dreams. But when her father died and her mother grew sick, those dreams were pushed aside. Survival became her only goal. Each day was a struggle. The crops refused to grow. Her younger siblings grew thinner. Her mother stopped talking about tomorrow. Once filled with laughter became a place of silence and hunger. That's when the promise arrived. A woman with perfume on her wrists and a foreign accent in her mouth. She said there was work in the Middle East. Domestic work. Cleaning. Cooking. A family that would treat Amara like one of their own. A few years of labor, she promised, and you'll come back rich. Amara hesitated. Her mother did not. Go, she said, save your brothers. She packed her life into one small bag. A dress. A notebook. Her Bible. She boarded a plane for the first time in her life, unaware that she was stepping not into opportunity, but into a trap. The plane lifted off. Her village disappeared beneath the clouds. And Amara, brave, desperate, and unaware, flew toward a storm no one had warned her about. This was how it began. With hope, with hunger, with a lie wrapped in opportunity. This was the beginning of Amara's journey. The heat struck fast. Not the warm, golden sun of home, but a burning, suffocating heat that clung to her skin like oil. Amara stepped off the plane and into a new world, Abu Dhabi. A city that gleamed with glass towers and marble floors, but behind that glitter, shadows lurked. What Amara found in Abu Dhabi wasn't opportunity. It was a prison wrapped in politeness, with golden curtains hiding cruelty. There was no welcome sign. No kind faces. Just a man holding a sign with her name, impatient eyes, and silence. She wasn't taken to an office or training center. There was no orientation, no tour, no paperwork she couldn't understand. She was told to get in the car. She obeyed, her passport was gone. Her name was forgotten. She became invisible, but her pain, all too real. The journey from the airport grew longer than expected, from highways to alleyways, then into a gated villa with stone walls too high to see over. This was her new home. It looked more like a fortress. Inside, everything sparkled. Crystal chandeliers. Polished floors. Gold-accented furniture. But the beauty was only skin deep. There were no smiles waiting for her, only demands. Her passport was taken without a word. Her phone locked in a drawer she would never see again. Amara was shown her room. It wasn't a room. It was a closet. A thin mattress on the floor. A bucket in the corner. No windows. No locks, except on the outside. This was her new reality. The next morning came early. 4 a.m. The knock on the door was sharp and final. She was ordered to cook breakfast, clean 6 bathrooms, mop 3 floors, and serve food she didn't recognize. She worked 12 hours. Then 16. Then more. There was no rest. No questions. No thanks. Her hands began to blister. Her feet ached. But she pushed through, because she believed this was temporary, just the first difficult step toward helping her family survive. She waited for kindness. She waited for the pay she had been promised. She waited for Sunday, her supposed day off. But none of it came. There were no Sundays. There was no salary. There was no kindness. Only commands. Shouting. And silence when she cried. And so Amara, alone in a palace not her own, began to understand she was not an employee. She was not a guest. She was not even a servant. She was property. This was not a job. This was captivity. The days began to blur. Time lost its meaning inside the mansion that was not hers. The sunrises brought more work. The sunsets brought no rest. And the nights brought dread. Amara no longer kept track of the days. She measured time in bruises, in meals missed, in how many shirts she had hand-washed before her hands bled. She was not allowed to step outside. The heavy gates remained closed. The windows were locked. Her world had shrunk to the size of a kitchen, a staircase, a dark closet she was told to sleep in. At night, the house fell silent. But Amara could not sleep. She had begun to notice the way the master of the house watched her. Not with indifference, but with ownership. Hunger. His gaze lingered too long. His footsteps near her door came too often. She tried to hide. She tried to make herself smaller, quieter, invisible. But nothing worked. Her silence did not protect her. It only made her easier to control. She was given food once a day. Just enough to stand. Never enough to feel full. Her body began to shrink. Her energy waned. But her spirit, though battered, refused to break. She began to pray, not for escape, but for endurance. For strength to survive one more hour. One more task. One more night. One evening, she found the courage to ask for her salary. The wages she had been promised. She did not raise her voice. She did not demand. She simply asked. They laughed. Then they shouted. Then they locked her in the closet. For 2 days. No food. No water. No light. Only darkness and the echo of her own breath. This was no longer misunderstanding. No longer poor treatment. This was abuse. Amara had left her home to save her family. But now, she had to fight to save herself. Hope, once a burning fire in her chest, had become a single flickering candle, fragile but alive. And she clung to it. Pain has a way of reshaping time. Of stretching hours into eternities and silencing even the loudest memories. In that house, Amara's suffering deepened, not just in the tasks forced upon her, but in the way her body and spirit were worn down, day by day, like stones underwater. She woke before the sun. Not because she wanted to, but because a metal spoon striking the door jolted her into motion. Her tasks were endless, floors to scrub, children to bathe, laundry to hand wash, and meals to prepare that she would never taste. Mistakes were not allowed. Burned rice. A slap. Spilled tea. A shove. Forgotten item from the market. A belt across her back. Her body became a map of silent bruises, purple, yellow, red, each one a stamp of ownership. A warning. She was no longer seen as a human being, but as something to be controlled. Her name was never spoken. Only insults hurled in languages she didn't understand. Only commands barked like orders in a prison yard. There were days she wasn't fed at all. When her stomach cried louder than her voice ever could. She began stealing leftover crumbs from the children's plates. Just enough to keep moving. Just enough to stay alive. Sleep came in snatches, an hour here, 2 there, interrupted by shouts, slams, or the dreaded sound of the master's footsteps in the hallway. Her door had no lock. Only fear stood between her and what he wanted. And yet, she never screamed. Never shouted. Even when her arm was twisted out of place. Even when hot oil was thrown near her feet as punishment. Even when the words, "You are nothing," were spoken into her face. She knew if she broke too loudly, they might send her back to her country empty-handed. Worse, they might bury her where no one would find her. And so she endured. In silence. In pain. In survival mode. But something was changing in her. Quietly. Slowly. A flame was lighting itself in the ruins of her soul. Not hope. Not yet. But defiance. The tiniest spark of it. A whisper that said, "You are not what they say you are." And it whispered again and again until it became a voice. There are some nights that never end even when morning comes. Nights that become scars stitched into the fabric of memory, never fading, never healing completely. For Amara, that night began like any other. But it would steal something from her that she could never get back. She had just finished scrubbing the marble floors, her knees raw and bleeding. The rest of the house was asleep. Or so she thought. The master, as always, was the last to retire. She felt his presence before she saw him. The sound of his bare feet moving slowly behind her. The click of the door closing. The sudden silence that pressed in like suffocating fog. Amara froze. Every instinct in her screamed. Every prayer she'd ever whispered rose to her lips. But prayers couldn't stop him. Not that night. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply reached for her like she belonged to him. And she knew, in that terrible instant, that resistance would mean pain, more pain than she had already known. What happened next she would not allow herself to fully remember. Her mind broke it into fragments. Shadows. Smells. The cold tile against her cheek. The weight of someone who saw her as nothing. The sound of her own breath strangled in her chest. When it was over, he left. Silent. Unmoved. As though she were a task completed. An object used and tossed aside. She lay on the floor for hours, unable to move. Her body betrayed her with tears she could not stop. But her voice stayed silent. Because in that house, truth had no value. And justice was not an option. She cleaned herself with shaking hands. She returned to her closet. And she waited for dawn, though nothing about the day could ever be called light again. This was her deepest wound. Not just the violence itself, but the knowing that she had no one to tell, no place to run, no law to protect her. She was invisible. And in that invisibility, unspeakable crimes could be committed without consequence. But as her body healed slowly, painfully, a shift began. The flame inside her, once flickering, now burned with quiet rage. Not just to survive, but to be seen. To be heard. To break the silence that had swallowed her. Amara had been broken, but not destroyed. And in the ashes of what had been done to her, a new resolve began to grow. There are moments, even in the darkest chapters, when the universe allows a crack of light to seep in, not enough to see clearly, but enough to remember that darkness isn't all there is. For Amara, that crack appeared in the form of a whisper. A voice like her own. A voice that hadn't forgotten how to speak. It happened in the hallway, late one night, when the house was sleeping. Amara had been ordered to fetch tea from the kitchen, barefoot and quiet. And that's when she saw her, another girl. Young. African. Holding a mop and staring at Amara with wide, tired eyes. They had passed each other before, but never spoken. Talking could bring punishment. But that night the silence broke. A whisper. A name. A simple question, where are you from? It was the beginning of something sacred. A secret sisterhood formed in brokenness. The other girl's name was Laila, and like Amara, she had come chasing hope, only to be caught in the same trap. They began to steal minutes together. In the laundry room. At the trash bins. In the corners of silence where cameras didn't reach. And there, in those stolen moments, they traded stories. Pain. Tears. And more than anything, the knowledge that they were not alone. Layla had been in this place for nearly 2 years. No pay. No day off. Her family believed she was thriving. They had no idea she was starving. That she had been locked inside for 700 days and counting. Together, Amara and Layla began to imagine a way out. Not a grand escape. Not a movie ending. Just a small plan, a simple one, to survive together. To look for signs. To map the house silently. To notice the routines, the shift changes, the unlocked doors. To watch for the rare moment when the gate might open without eyes on it. And though nothing changed yet on the outside, something shifted within. Amara no longer cried herself to sleep every night. She now had someone to pray for and someone praying for her. They made a pact. If one of them found a way out, she would find a way to tell the world. Not just about herself. But about all of them. The invisible workers. The voiceless captives. The women buried behind marble walls. Amara was still a prisoner. Still starved. Still carrying the trauma of what had been done to her. But now, she had a reason to keep going. A flicker of connection. A breath of rebellion. A whisper that might become a roar. Hope had returned. Not as a fantasy, but as a choice. And she was choosing it, one whisper at a time. Sometimes, survival means more than breathing. It means fighting in silence, resisting in small ways, and reclaiming the parts of yourself they tried to erase. Amara had been silent for so long, too long, but now, with Layla by her side, she began to see that silence wasn't her only weapon. She had studied the house. The routines. The weaknesses. She now knew which family members left the keys hanging carelessly. Which door creaked. Which didn't. When the deliveries came. When the guards grew distracted. She noticed things no one else bothered to. She memorized patterns. She made mental notes of everything, the code the delivery man dialed at the gate, the brand of phone the mistress used, the exact moment every night when the security light blinked off for 10 seconds. They had no idea the girl they'd called worthless had a mind sharp enough to dissect their world piece by piece. Layla and Amara began leaving messages for each other, tiny notes hidden in the hem of laundry, carved into soap bars, whispered in moments stolen between duties. Every message meant one thing: stay alive. Stay ready. Then came the moment that changed everything. A guest had arrived, a woman from abroad, visiting for just 2 days. She left her phone unattended on the counter as she chatted with the mistress. Just for a moment. One breath of time. And in that breath, Amara made a choice. With shaking hands, she picked it up. Opened the camera. Snapped a photo of her face bruised, eyes hollow. She didn't say a word. Didn't write a plea. The image alone would have to speak for her. She sent it to a WhatsApp number Layla remembered, the number of a Ghanaian man who once worked in Abu Dhabi and helped others in secret. They didn't know if it would go through. They didn't know if help would come. But it was a message cast into the ocean. A flare fired into the sky. After that, the waiting began. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. No sign. No answer. But something was different. Amara no longer felt completely powerless. She had acted. She had risked everything. And for the first time, she had pushed back. She no longer walked with her head down. She held Layla's gaze with more fire. And though her body remained inside that mansion, something inside her had stepped outside the walls. Because that's how escape begins, not with running, but with refusing to be invisible. refusing to be silent, refusing to be broken. Cracks were forming in the wall around her. And soon, those cracks would split wide enough for the light to flood in. For days, nothing happened. The photo had vanished into the digital void. Amara tried not to hope. Hope was dangerous, she had learned that. But she couldn't help it. Every knock on the door made her heart race. Every ring of the phone made her hands tremble. And then, one morning, it came. A knock at the outer gate. Farm. Repeated. The kind of knock that doesn't wait for permission. Amara froze in the hallway, a broom in her hand. The mistress rushed to the window. The master followed, grumbling. There was a voice outside. A man. Speaking in Arabic, but calm, official. Amara couldn't understand every word, but she recognized something in his tone: authority. Demand. Intent. She peeked through a narrow window near the kitchen. Her heart nearly stopped. It was him. The Ghanaian contact Laila had spoken of, or someone sent by him. He was standing at the gate with two others. One wore the uniform of a labor rights organization. The other held a folder and a phone in hand, with Amara's photo open on the screen. Chaos erupted inside the house. Shouting. Doors slamming. Phones dialing. The master ordered Amara and Laila into the storage room, told them not to speak, not to come out. But it was too late. The gate opened. The official stepped in. Calm. Confident. Prepared. Time moved strangely after that. Amara heard voices outside. Saw flashes of light from the camera phones. The officials demanded to see identification documents, the ones the family had taken when Amara first arrived. The ones she hadn't seen in months. The mistress lied. Said Amara had run away. That Laila had stolen things. That everything was fine. But the photo said otherwise. The bruises told a story that couldn't be denied. And then, the most terrifying sound of all, her name spoken softly by one of the officials. Amara. She stepped forward. For the first time, she wasn't hiding. Her hands trembled. Her voice shook. But she looked up and said, yes. And just like that, the story began to change. The officials insisted the girls come with them. The master protested. Screamed. Threatened. But the law, though slow and flawed, stood that day. The men escorted Amara and Laila out through the gate. Out of the nightmare. Into a waiting vehicle. Amara didn't cry. Not yet. Her body was still in shock. But inside, something broke, not in pain, but in release. The chain around her soul had snapped. As the car pulled away, she looked back at the house. The place that had tried to erase her. That had nearly succeeded. And in her heart, she whispered a prayer, not for revenge. But for every girl still locked behind similar walls. They had made it out. But this was not the end. It was the beginning of a different battle, for justice, for healing, and for the voice she was no longer afraid to use. Freedom doesn't come all at once. Sometimes, it doesn't feel like freedom at all. Not at first. After so many months of fear, pain, and silence, even peace can feel unfamiliar. Uncomfortable. Like wearing someone else's clothes. The safe house was small. Tucked between dusty buildings and guarded by quiet women with kind eyes. But to Amara, it felt like a new world. A quiet world. One where doors didn't slam. Where hands weren't raised. Where sleep wasn't a trap. There were other girls there, some younger, some older, each with their own scars. Their own unfinished stories. No one asked questions right away. No one pressed. They let Amara rest. They let her eat. And for the first time in nearly a year, they let her be. Her body began to recover fast, slowly. Wounds closed. Bruises faded. Her weight returned, little by little. But the deeper injuries, the ones buried in her memory, in her spirit, they would take longer. She began counseling. Just short sessions at first. A quiet room with a social worker who didn't look at her like a problem to be solved, but a person learning to breathe again. At first, Amara couldn't speak. Her voice was a locked drawer. But then came one sentence. Then another. Until one day, the words poured out in a flood, all of it. The abuse. The rape. The silence. The photo. The escape. She told her story. Every detail. Not because it would undo the past, but because it honored her part that had survived it. And something beautiful happened. The more she spoke, the more the shame faded. The more the guilt that was never hers to carry began to lift. With support from the shelter, Amara filed a report. Her employers were contacted. Investigated. And while justice in the system came slowly, it came. Their household was flagged. Their rights to hire foreign workers were revoked. A small victory. But a real one. Most importantly, Amara's passport was returned. Her documents were restored. And for the first time in a long time, she belonged to herself again. She was offered a choice: go home to Kenya or stay under legal protection in the Middle East and help advocate for others like her. And Amara chose to speak. Because healing isn't just about leaving the past behind. Sometimes, it's about turning back, not in pain, but with purpose. To make sure no one else gets swallowed in the same silence. Her story was no longer a secret. It was a light.